Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you've been having a good evening so far and you continue to cherish the amount of talent that is to follow. I just want to take a moment to raise awareness of a very important environmental issue that is facing the people back home in Jaffna, Sri Lanka. Now, some of you may know about the Chunnakam power station oil spillage, and it has come to light recently that groundwater in certain parts of Jaffna have been contaminated with waste oil. And this is as a result of the power station, which is government owned by the Ceylon Electricity Board. The contamination itself has become detrimental to the people of Jaffna, and they've been deprived of basic human necessities such as cooking, bathing, cleaning, and etc. And unfortunately, no major action has been taken to relieve the situation as the desperate struggle back home continues. I hope this short talk just gives you a clearer insight into what is truly happening back home, and hopefully we all together can find a way to resolve and put pressure upon those who may be responsible into finding a solution for this, as we are continuing to move towards environmental justice. A bit of geography first of all, and a bit of background. Sri Lanka itself is split into 9 provinces. The northern province itself is then split into 5 districts, one of which is Jaffna, and within Jaffna itself is where the Chunnakam power station is located in the region of Valikam. The water supply itself of Jaffna, as mentioned before, well, they primarily rely on the groundwater source for drinking water, and unfortunately there is no other available source for use. Beneath the ground itself, there is a reservoir of fresh and clean water held underground in a layer of rock called aquifers. These aquifers are water-bearing rocks, and the water moves freely beneath this layer. It keeps a fresh source of water there, thus it's very easily accessible if you were to tap into the ground and access this water, and this is the way in which the people of Jaffna have been using their water up till now. In some areas though, the water passes through the soil on top of the aquifer, but in some areas it joins on cracks in the rock itself. And there is no bacteria or any kind of pollutant in these aquifers. So it does come as a surprise, it doesn't come as a surprise actually, that this water supply hasn't caused such widespread disease or harm to the people within the local area in Jaffna itself. So the aquifers in Jaffna, there are 4 aquifers located in the Jaffna district, and that store water underground. And one of which is, the one in question, is actually in the Valikam region. This aquifer actually has 100,000 wells that feed into it, with 30% of it used agriculturally, and that could include things such as raising fruit, vegetables, and all of these are grown in the area and distributed around. And 70% of it is domestic use, so such a large proportion of it does affect human consumption. And of course these wells are used as the primary water source by the people who live in the Valikam region. Quickly, a bit of history of the Chunnakam power station and really how it's led to the current problem with the waste oil contamination. As I said, it's owned by the government-owned Ceylon Electricity Board, and in the beginning of the power station's opening, it was using generators from oil to produce this electricity. In 1964, the Chunnakam power station was connected to the Lajapana Dam, situated about 200 miles from Jaffna, and instead, it got its power from hydropower, and the generators are only really used as a backup up to this point. However, between 1990 to 2005, of course, many of us know the peak of the Civil War was during this time, and so the power station closed and shut off completely. And so the government completely cut off any kind of electricity supply to the north. And so when it reopened in 2005, they used, once again, they brought back the generators for the main use of supply for electricity. And there were 3 generators that were actually used, and these were supplied by a company called Agrico. And for 4 years, so up to 2009, they were their sole supplier. Then again in 2009, they acquired an additional 6 generators from the Northern Power Company to meet an ever-increasing demand for electricity. But then we move forward to 2013, where the Chunnakam power station again is connected still to the Lakshmana Dam, but despite any additional generators in place, the ever-growing demand for electricity was still not met. So, how does this actually bring us to the problem that the people are facing today after all these closures, the regular checks and all these installations? Well, if we go back to 1958, where we initially opened the power station, any waste oil that was produced was disposed of appropriately. The waste oil either went to the south of Sri Lanka to be disposed of well or burnt in incinerators. However, since the power station was opened in 2005, the method of disposal became somewhat dubious. The Chunnakam station itself, it's situated in 23 acres of land, and what both companies did was sort of dispose of the oil around the surrounding area, sort of forming what you could call an oil pond. And the land effectively became much more overflowed, and this is how the effect became about. This land was later cemented over to hide the oil pond and had water tanks put on top. Thereafter, in 2009, the companies drilled themselves 12 holes into the land in order to continue to dispose of the oil in this manner now. But there is an ongoing case as to who is actually responsible solely for this man-made drilling, and it goes in very deep, 150 feet into the ground, and this oil was injected straight through. Another thing, there was a well at the power station which wasn't in use. These companies also spilled oil into this well, and once this well was full, they put sands and broken stones and then cemented this off as well. There's currently a court case that's going, and both Agrico and Northern Power claim that they sold their waste oil to paint companies rather than actually having disposed of it in the manners in which are mentioned here. So, well, why is this happening? Why are these companies or the government really doing this? As you can see up there, that is the sort of outline of how the oil is sort of spread into the undergrowth of the Jaffna mainland, and you can have a look for that yourself. So, we come back to an extension of the original timeline that I showed to you earlier, but instead there are things which weren't mentioned so much, and these were the first sightings of oil in the period between 2005 and today to last year, 2014. Well, the first sighting of the oil within the wells was observed in 2007 by a local villager called Sockalingam. She verbally reported this to her local village, but no further actions were actually taken. In 2011, the National Water Supply and Drainage Board commissioned a project to start a water supply unit in the Sockalingam East area. It's roughly about 1.5 miles away from the power station. When they dug for the water, they visibly noticed the oil sheen in the water as well as the smell. The project was shut down immediately as a result, and this was reported back to the Chunnakam Power Water Board, but once again, nothing appeared to be done about it. In 2012, the oil started spreading further and was now visible within a 2-mile radius of the region. Furthermore, the Sri Lankan Water Board then eventually conducted an investigation into a total of 150 wells in the area. And out of the 150 wells, 116 of those were found to have been contaminated with oil and grease. But unfortunately, this report was conveniently hidden at the time, and has only come into light during the proceedings in the October last year. Okay. What needs to be done? The power stations itself needs to be closed, and the health ministry needs to declare the area as a disaster area. The private generator companies, Agrico and Northern Power, need to be held accountable for their actions and have their licenses revoked. These affected wells need to be contaminated, and of course these people need an alternative supply of water, because obviously they should not be deprived of this basic need. We want people that can very environmental activists especially, and people that are prepared to go and do field projects abroad to help research even more into this problem. Make the World Health Organization aware of this, petition and continue to campaign against this desperate struggle for us. Speakers at public forums, if you want to speak about this subject, or if you want to even go into more further detail about it, you can either come and speak to myself, or you can go through the Imperial Commons Society, and we're based all around today, around Megamala this evening. We would like to completely get involved. I mean, we want to put pressure as much as we can onto the government, onto those responsible, and we can find a solution to this problem. Thank you very much.